tonight's topic is about crime, and so I did a quick a quick just start of the topic because the goal of these topics is to do kind of truth seeking together collaboratively, not to present an already digested amount of data, which is what we used to do. But now I'm trying to get to the truth seeking element between Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters. Hopefully, we'll have some Trump supporters tonight. We usually do. And the idea is to talk about, crime in the last couple of presidencies, and, in maybe trends overall, we can kind of meander a little bit. But, we can start with crime in the last couple of presidencies, since Trump came to office is kind of seen as a big milestone in U.S. politics, whether you think it's for better or for worse. It's seen as a pretty big milestone by both sides of the aisle. What I did to try to analyze this is I said, well, first of all, I looked at sources for crime, and I'm using something called Notebook LM. And what this will do is and I haven't played with this, so I'm doing this kind of publicly without having fully explored the tool, but my friend that was going to help facilitate with this isn't here tonight. So he wasn't able to make it. So I'm going to just put the link in, and if anyone has done multi-user Notebook LM more often than I have, which is definitely if you've done it once, you've done it more than me, then feel free to jump in there and we should all be able to give it commands. What I asked it about is to compare the violent crime rate per 100,000 people per month. And I did it per month intentionally, although it'll be on average for Trump's first term, for Biden's term, and then for Trump's second term. I did it per month because Trump's second term is not fully done yet. And so it might have a different trend than the first term. There was coronavirus in the first term, so that could have trended things up or down. And so I figured it would be worth comparing first term and second term as best we can with limited data. And so I haven't even read the results yet, to be honest. But it looks like, let's see. So in 2020, the murder rate rose to 6.8. That's violent crime. Violent crime was relatively stable until a historic spike occurred with the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, and then by 2023 and 2024, violent crime dropped to a near 50-year low, which is interesting. And so um, there is data divergence between what the FBI reports and NCN's National Crime Victimization Survey. I definitely know that there have been incidences of police not wanting to report crimes, which is pretty terrible if you ask me. And so Donald Trump's, this is not giving the best answers. 2025 projection. Uh, d- d- oh, here we go. This is what we want is a table. So under Trump, 6.8 homicides per 100,000 people, a 30% spike, historic increase. And then under Biden, 12% decline, 14.9% decline. And then under Trump on the second term, lowest since 1900. So, um, that's a starting point. So I'm curious if anyone has, you know, perspectives on this that wants to share. Like, I'm happy to just go around and like talk about this with people, and you can present your own prompts in here. You should be able to, I believe. But go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I just had a question
Yeah,
about, a lot of people do this for a lot of political topics, is they'll cite stats for a certain, administration, like the game is completely reset at the
right.
beginning. And it's like some of this stuff just has to lag. And I
It
wonder,
does.
how do we properly compensate for that? Because things change under varying rates, and I mean it's just a mess. And I'm just curious how you deal with that.
I think it gets so like it gets messy and but I think over a 4-year term, and that's why I think Trump's second term, it's probably, there probably is too much of a potential for lag because it's so early. But um, like if you look at situations like the economy under George Bush, right? The economy was cratering under George Bush, and then Obama took over, and very quickly the economy turned around, and for 8 years the economy went up and up and up. And then, Trump came into power and took credit for, the upward trend. And it's like, wait a minute, like that was an upward trend that, was going down before Obama took over that turned around under Obama. And over 8 years, it's pretty hard to argue that that was a Bush lag, especially when it was going down under Bush. So it's kind of hard to argue Biden or that Obama didn't have a positive impact on the economy, but certainly there are people who would argue it, and I welcome them to raise their hand if we have someone here tonight that wants to. But that's not the topic for tonight. But in terms of crime, I mean, showing, Biden at historic lows, we could go further back too and go under Obama.
But for federal policy affecting local crime rates, what would be the primary driver, do you think?
let's ask that. What are the
That was a point I was going to make. That's odd about the association on this topic between crime and who's in the office of presidency. I mean, and one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about is, federal enforcement like ICE or migration. Those issues, affect crime. But aside from that, most all other factors that affect crime don't come from the president. And I would just, I'm curious to know, there's people on this call from all over the country. Anecdotally, and where I'm sitting in Denver, I've just progressively, where I've grown up here, progressively watched crime get worse and worse. And especially, a lot worse, maybe in, let's say, the last 10 years. And I don't think that's 100% related to either administration that's been in office for those years in terms of presidency, but has to do with, increased and more local policies. Here in Denver, with respect to, we've got increased drug use in the streets, increased homelessness. We do have significant increased migration and lack of jobs. And so all of those things. And then with the pandemic, obviously there was a huge spike during the pandemic, and I don't know what that's related to, whether it's people kind of going crazy and and disconnected from each other, or again an economics factor that caused just massive. Here in Denver, we were first or second in the country with respect to car thefts, carjackings. We have an increased, even in the Denver suburbs, sort of not where crime has historically been in the center. We have increased, just lots of people walking around who appear to be, taking drugs, or we have hotels being
Try to finish your thought, Shelley.
run by the city in terms of homelessness. So I've just seen a real increase in crime, and I would argue that it doesn't have, aside from maybe the like I say, if we go back to migration or ICE, or that's a federal issue. Aside from that, I wouldn't say that it has much to do with the administration rather than
Yeah.
local policies.
So I hear that I hear that opinion, but I asked this is Notebook LM, which is Google's AI, and it actually makes a pretty good argument that there's a lot of federal influence because of funding. So the federal government funds local and state governments for public safety, and actually that funding, in turn, helps like inner city hotspots that are high crime places to look for ways to deter crime and try to build community instead of leaving people in the inner cities, et cetera, to their sort of like typical route of having crime be an outlet. And so it does seem like there's a lot of federal influence on local crime rates. Um, so I would encourage people to fact check that. That's just, a quick, perusal. But if you like, part of what we want to do tonight is like all be able to fact check together. And so if you find a reason that what I just said is wrong, like great, present that and put a link in, and then we look at that link and we can go back and forth and hear different opinions. That said, we have a bunch of hands up, and I forgot to announce our hands and announcement policy. So if you raise your hand, that gives you up to 2 minutes to kind of make a comment or ask a question. And then anyone that wants to comment on that question, I'm always going to try to make someone feel heard. So I'm going to respond unless someone else jumps in. If someone else jumps in, I'll generally let them. Um, and then, when you respond to someone, asking thoughtful questions about understanding their perspective is great. Making a comment is fine, but keep it to under 20 or 30 seconds. And that way we can move around a large room and have a conversation about a topic. And then once we finish that topic, we move to the next hand. So that's kind of how we manage with a large group, but still get group conversation. So Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna repeat what some of what's been said. It, for me, when you're listening to the statistics and that, to some extent, it doesn't mean anything to me. It's like the economy. Like if you have a job and you got a raise and you're buying new stuff and you're going, the economy's great. Just like it doesn't matter what's going on outside of your circle if that's what's happening, right? If the things are looking good. The same way with crime, right? Like in my neighborhood where I'm affluent, it's great. Nothing, there's not a lot of crime here, right? There's not a lot of crime going on at all. Never is. And so hearing about the statistics doesn't mean much to me on a personal level, right? It's very anecdotal, but I think that's where if you're examining your life and what's going on, that's what you're going to see. And a lot and to parrot what was said about like these trends, I think need to be if someone's implementing things that are going to help improve jobs, it has to be it has to be a long-term plan, right? I mean, if industry's going out of an area over a long time, of course you're going to see an uptick in crime. And I don't think, and there's not much you can do about it unless you can change that dynamic. If your demographics change over time, but like what's government going to do about that, right? If demographics change. So, and these trends are like long-term trends, and who happens to be in power? I'm going to be cynical here. It ends up being if something good happens, they take credit for it. If something bad happens, they blame it on the guy before them, right? I mean, in explaining it to us is correlation that isn't necessarily causation. That's all.
Would empathy play a part in trying to have empathy for people who live in different neighborhoods that have higher crime levels?
Um, sure, but I mean,
So if
how
you
does
Oh
that
look
become
at
God.
policy?
the big ugly bill, I call it, it's going to double the number of homeless people. And if you think about it, the statistics are that homeless people are over 500 times likely to cause crimes. So if that bill does come into, fruition in that way, there's a very
Mhm.
significant chance that crime rates are going to go way up, and that will affect a large swath of society in a way that was very much avoidable. And in fact, because of the expense of having criminals in the criminal justice system, it's cheaper to house people than it is to have them be unhoused because of the drastically higher crime rate. And we talked about this when we presented on the big ugly bill, and how the the savings are actually outweighed by the expenses when you take those cuts. So does that
But
make sense, Ellen?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, empathizing with folks. Yeah, but as I said, it it has to go from, if someone signs it into law, the next government can't like cut that law. You have to follow the policy through, right? I mean,
Well, they can cut the funding, or they can increase funding from federal coffers to like handle those types of issues. But yeah, there are certain things that are law that you can't get around. Congress has the power of the purse.
and,
But
and
you can be a president
yeah.
that rallies people and says we need to, to choose the cheaper and more humane option and just house these people.
we,
Um,
I think
Yeah,
we're giving
I anyway, go
like
ahead.
this
Go ahead.
narrative that is not taking a more humanitarian stance by not highlighting the fact that the reason why minorities are being blamed for all of the crime or the majority is because they can't afford the lawyers. Period. Let's take it down to brass tacks here. We're dealing with privilege. We're dealing with neocolonialism.
Yeah, I would argue that there's a statistical alignment with what you're saying, Kyle, but I think it goes beyond race. It's really more of a socioeconomic thing, which is often racially aligned. But I would say it's more of a socioeconomic problem because you could be of a minority race, but be a doctor and you have plenty of money for a lawyer. So I think it's a socioeconomic issue rather than a race-based issue in that case.
I agree with that too. I think that I think there's a lot of evidence to show that economics has a big effect on crime.
I will say, like, if you look at socioeconomics by race, there are trends there, right? And so it does disproportionately affect minorities in some respects, but I still would argue that it's a socioeconomic issue that should be dealt with socioeconomically rather than by racial along racial lines.
Right, I
So
agree with that. And the I guess the crime rate does have a correlation with the economy.
Right?
so
People have less money, they don't have enough money to feed themselves, then what are you going to do? I mean, like, you can either starve to death or do something that's unethical. And, if I'm given those two choices, like, you can beg for a while, but you may not find enough food every day.
let
Probably
me
different types of crime.
juxta
White collar
juxtapose
crime
these
is going to
two.
be your Wall Street crime is going to be your rich people doing all that type of business.
Well, rich people don't steal because they're hungry. Like, because the economy is bad, rich people don't choose to steal more, right?
They
Like,
need a new yacht.
I mean, I don't think rich people are, yeah, but yeah, that's a different story, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Can we
yeah.
go in order?
So I
Well,
was just going to say,
I
are
want to
we?
address the person's comment right there about can we go in order? So once a hand is raised, we go back with like 20 and less than 20 or 30-second comments on that topic for a while, and then we'll move on to the next hand. So you may not have been here when I announced that. So
I,
anyone have
I,
other comments on that one?
I was just going to say following up on the comment with mine. So are we juxtaposing the approaches, like to say a policy should be more empathetic, and that has to carry through to however long it takes, and I don't know, I don't have a number there to be effective, or enforcement is the approach, and one side's going to do more enforcement, and they're going to say the same thing. We want to see that through to see results.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alan. We actually did an event on recidivism, which means the rate at which people cause crimes again after going to prison. And the U.S. had a very low recidivism rate until the 70s, when the whole criminal justice system switched around from being rehabilitation focused to being punishment focused. So actually, our natural inclination to think that harsher punishment will reduce crime is actually the opposite of the case. If you look at the Nordics, they have some of the lowest recidivism rates, and they focus completely on rehabilitation. The prisons are cushy, quite frankly. we would look at it as like a nice middle class kind of place to live, practically.
Hey, Garrett, I don't know if it's come up yet, but I've heard that as far as imprisonment goes, there's usually three arguments made for why we imprison people, and one is for rehabilitation to get people off the streets so that they can be learn to be a better person so that they don't do that type of thing again. One is for punishment. One is for punitives to take vengeance off the hands of the people so that if blood feuds going back and forth. And the third one is basically for public safety to keep people who might be violent or whatever, if they're not on the street, that speaks to your recidivism aspect here. And I feel like all three of them are important in their own way.
Interesting. I'm curious what other people think about that. For me, rehabilitation and public safety are kind of the same. If you can rehabilitate someone, you
Hmm.
have helped public safety, but
Hmm.
vengeance, I just don't see like merit to vengeance. Like getting back at people, revenge is not like, I mean, it's emotionally satisfying, but it's not logically helpful.
I think let me make the short, very short argument for why it's logically helpful is because people, if your family member was victimized by somebody, you are going to be emotionally charged to do something about that. But if the state steps in and says, we will be the neutral party that will dole out justice in that sense, you won't feel like you have to take matters into your own hands if a justice system is doing that for you. So that is where the aspect of punishment comes in is there are actual consequences, and it's not simply just for safety or just to rehabilitate somebody, because if somebody feels like they've been deeply wronged or hurt or violated by somebody, that something is going to be done by it, but it's not going to be you or your brother or your cousin doing it.
Yeah. For
Okay,
like
But
repeat
doesn't
offender, go ahead,
can
please.
I
I
just
just
jump in?
don't deterrence. I mean,
I'm gonna respond to Sean, and then I want to, after we go through this round, I'd like to go back to the other person. So I have a couple of pent up responses. First of all, Sean, that's a very traditional view of um, the role of the state. And there's a great book called The Weirdest People in the World. That's us, wealthy, educated, individualistic, blah, blah, blah. And he makes a very strong case for the kinship-based society, which is, basically the standard. That's why, that's one of the reasons why um, when things got bigger and bigger, it was to interkin, um, uh, tamp down the violence. Okay. Uh, I would like to just respond to um, I think the person before me or the person before them was talking about the effects of um, the effects of federal policy on crime rates. I think you, Garrett, brought this up. You did a little Google. I did a Google on, are there any studies that show how federal policy affects crime rates? Now, I think this is very important because just showing statistics like you did initially is very provocative, but tells very little about the big story. Um, so I don't know why you did that, just showing presidential years. I mean, it gets the discussion going, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's just very shallow analysis. So they came up with four, Brennan Center for Justice, Johns Hopkins University, Science Direction. Taylor Francis has a book on public integrity and Legal Defense Fund. And the summary is uh, federal funding of, it was just you said federal funding of police officers and training and that type of stuff counts a lot. And they also show that blah, 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 social welfare spending, such as income transfers and food stamps, has greater impact on reducing violent and property crime than some policing strategies, as it is directly addresses root cause. There's like 10 bullet items. So I will put into the chat the query that I put into Google, whatever, deep thinking, and they come up with a, pretty well-rounded, okay, incarceration. They said 1% increase in the probability of going to prison has blah, 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 showing a deterrent. So if anybody really is serious about understanding this problem, I don't think none of us are like scholars on this area, so I don't think this discussion is going to get very far until we do a deep dive into what professional scholars and presumably some of these universities have the, causality. There are ways, some of my background's in statistics and data, and I've been doing social science research for about 10 years in the beginning of my career, and teasing out causality and all sorts of stuff is very requires some skill, and so I'm going to put this in the uh, in the comments.
Yeah, we're not, Gene, the ones that are running the studies, but we can read the studies of people who have studied these things, but
Yeah.
read the studies by the scholars. And the reason that I talked about precedents is that the federal funding is a significant cause of crime going up and down, as I understand it. And so that was why I talked about it, because Trump has drastically cut federal funding for reducing crime in communities. So
But it's
that
not
is
just that. It's not just that. It's also the social programs like food stamps.
correct.
Just
And it's
thinking.
across the board that he's kind of made these financial cuts against the most vulnerable people who then have often very little choice but to turn to crime. So um you you know corner
Could,
someone and they fight, right? So
could I give a fourth reason
please.
for? I think the people are incarcerated because it economically supports the enforcement, justice, and prison system.
You
Like
mean
it's an
the
industry. It's an industry.
private prisons?
Yeah, it's an industry.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is an
incarcerating people
industry.
in America is an industry,
Yeah,
and
and
that's
by
why.
the way, when I asked Notebook LM what are the biggest influences on crime, one is socioeconomic shocks like crime going up during coronavirus. Number two cause is federal funding and resource allocation. So I think we would be remiss to just ignore the fact that research says that like that's a probably the biggest preventable cause of crime that exists, federal funding. Um, Anyone else on that topic? Derek, good to hear from you. Good to see you.
Oh, let me turn this off so y'all can hear. Yeah, I think someone else mentioned it. I guess to tag along with the influx and the variation between administrations and trends going up, and where do you delineate one administration from the other? I think someone else brought up, and I don't know if in your presentation you have the correlation, like overlays between economic prosperity and crime statistics. I think that would be interesting to look at visually. That was
Say
one.
the say it again,
Two,
Derek. Sorry.
I think this kind of was brought up. No, this is just about the like an overlay or a comparison between correlation between economic prosperity within the country and crime statistics, and how positively or negatively is correlated. Um, and then secondly, I think we were talking about someone was talking about how in their neighborhood everything is relatively safe or whatever. And you get this within polling within the presidential elections as well, or just any time where citizens polled often report satisfaction with their local crime, economy, or prospects very highly, but are negative uh, to the country their perception of it generally can be negative. And I know you touched on how, just you have empathy and don't just be have a pinhole view of your own local situation. However, I think that can be sort of an issue because the media can sort of gin up some perceptions that may not necessarily be based in fact. And then thirdly, I know my time is running out. I remember reading some stats, I'm trying to find it now, about how return on investment between more police versus providing more social services, social workers, etc., has a better long-term durable return on investment for lowering crime than adding more police. For instance, like Chicago has a lot of big police, but to use the boogeyman, and that a bunch of cops got more cops than probably most metropolitan areas. So yeah, hiring one extra cop versus social services.
Derek, thanks for reminding me that we try to keep each hand to one comment or question because otherwise the conversation can't focus on one thing. So it's not your fault, it's my fault. I forgot to say that. So, but for future reference, try to keep each hand to one comment or question. There's not a lot of hands up, so we'll get to all your questions. Just do one at a time, and that way we can rotate. I want to answer the first one because I looked it up. Concentrated poverty leads, where 30% of the residents are below the poverty line, leads to 3 to 4 times higher crime than other residential areas. So there's a big correlation between poverty and crime. Anyone else have comments on any of what Derek said? You can comment on any of it because we already covered it. So
I wanted to say,
yeah.
relative to what you just offered, we also have to remember that there are a number of things that cause poverty,
Yep.
right? And some of I worry that people hear that poverty has a causal relationship to crime, and then they blame the impoverished, when my poverty might be partially my fault, or it could be systemic racism, it could be systemic classism, it could be a number of things. So these things have we make these very simple binary connections between two concepts, and they're rarely that simple.
Yeah.
They're rarely that
I
simple.
I certainly wasn't trying to get at that when I made the comment. My point was more that when you so I'm going to bring up one of the FTI's very ambitious goals, which is to create a world in which every human being on Earth makes the modern USD equivalent in purchasing power parity in an average US city of $100,000 a year. So to try to essentially eliminate any kind of not only poverty, but any kind of wanting for money, which is not going to happen in my lifetime. But if I can start a snowball effect so that 3 or 4 generations later, it actually very much should be realistic, given how much efficiency there's going to be from AI and technology improvements beyond that we haven't even seen yet. So, I think your point is well taken, Damaris. I think it would be wise not to blame the poor for being poor, which I know some people tend to do, but rather look for how can we help the poor to not be poor anymore so that we reduce the amount of crime in the world.
Yeah, a small, short comment on that, I think, is the causal nature of it. I think sometimes it's a vicious cycle, but sometimes it's the reverse, where rather than poverty causing the crime, crime in an area can cause poverty. If there's a lot of violent crime in an area, businesses won't invest. Stores will move. You end up getting food deserts in certain communities. People won't be there. Things are locked up, and people won't do things in a community, which just creates more poverty and more desperation. So I think it's not only a one-way street. That's it.
I'm going to research that.
Look up, crime causes poverty, I think would be the way to look at it.
Well, I'm saying when you ask AI a question, you don't want to ask one direction because it tends to be sycophantic and it'll agree with you. So what I did is I asked, has it been studied whether crime causes poverty or poverty causes crime? And that way it won't be biased to agree with me. It'll give me an objective answer because I've given it both possibilities as equally weighted. Does that make sense?
It totally does. I have found that AI, like statistics, depending on how you ask the question, the answer you get can be very different. So you
Correct.
can get to agree with you. It's kind of the I'm right.com of modern era. And you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's important, and that's why I mention it, because to help people like know how to use AI so that they don't get those
Yeah.
biased answers.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I agree with Garrett. Yeah, ask the question in a neutral way and don't lead. Uh, by the way, just to, I think Sean's or somebody else's comment, uh, I read a study and it seemed to be a well-run study that fixing up neighborhoods, like let's say there's a vacant lot and it's just messy and there's no trees on the block, just fixing up the block, uh, in addition to reducing crime, fixing up blocks makes residents more proud of their block or whatever, and uh, more willing to look out to protect the block, call the police if they see something suspicious, etc. In other words, they haven't completely given up. So this was once, I don't know if I'm,
It's broken windows.
yeah. So that's okay. And but it gets people involved, to just a little bit more involved, and watching out, etc., can fix a lot of things. Um,
Thanks, Gene. And by the way, I did find an answer where they did case studies and causality. They have Baton Rouge, where in Hurricane Katrina there was a huge amount of unemployment amongst young men. A lot of teens pushed out of school, displaced families, and in both cases, homicide spiked by 30 to 50% the following year. Whereas when in Houston, when Hurricane Harvey hit, the city managed to keep schools open, young adult employment stable, and despite the disaster, homicide rates never spiked. So it actually decreased. So there actually is in those examples, a causality of economics results in crime
yeah.
spikes.
Well, and when you have
I mean,
examples, too, it's
those are
anecdotal.
taking specific examples of,
Yeah.
where you can like show causality in one direction or another. Now,
Uh, it,
it
it,
could have been other yeah. So.
there could be confounding factors.
I
Okay.
mean, yeah, we everything could be, we could not exist, right? So there's all kinds of
No,
possibilities, but
there are ways to analyze data.
you can
Yeah, and
research it
those are
too, Gene. Research it, Gene, and tell me what you come up with in terms of
okay. Fine.
causality between crime and poverty. So
Well, there have been good studies,
yeah,
and along the lines that we've discussed. So
no, I'm
just
genuinely
looking for it.
asking you to bring those studies to bear tonight. That's what
Okay,
this is
fine.
all about, is to all share our best
Okay.
practices. Like I haven't researched the studies before, so I just got this off the
Yeah.
top of an AI search, and maybe it's not the most
All right.
detailed
I'll
and
I'll I'll
yeah,
post, but I can't do this in real time. I'll do this like tonight, and I'll
sure.
post it on the thing.
Yeah, put
Okay.
it in Discord. And
Oh,
that's
I'll
where
put it in the
I want to
Discord.
encourage everyone to Gene's to this point. Sometimes it makes sense to have that time offline. And so if you come to the Freethinker Institute website, there's a link to our Discord community, and we talk about the topic afterwards, and we can do research and bring other facts to bear. So that said, Dustin, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say when you mentioned the Obama years crime going down and coming back up, that's between 2009 to 17, and overall graph in US that says crime rate since 1991, it peaked in 1991 to then steadily went down and picking back up. It's about the same level as 2016. So in the longer trend, I think it's still going down. Second thing is, I saw when I searched for Canada because I'm Canadian, I saw the same graph despite not having the presidents here, mirroring the almost same pattern. So I don't think um, we are suffering the exact same issues, but I just want to say, yeah, Canada is having very similar graph that's coming down from late 80s, early 90s, down to 2000 and all the way down to early 2020 and spiking up a bit now. So I just want to say it's not just US pattern that we are seeing. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to try to look up the graph of violent crime rates per capita over the last 50 years. So I'll screen share that when I get to it. Does anyone have comments for Dustin?
I recently I had a deep conversation going with a friend of mine about violent crime rates since 2019, and I assembled the statistics from the Bureau of Justice Statistics as well as the FBI Uniform Crime Reporter. I'll post it in the comments if anyone wants to take a look at it year over year.
Cool. Thanks.
Oh, okay. One more thing I forgot about it. So when you are talking about crime, I'm assuming there are multiple reasons why people commit crime. I think some are based on the need. That's why it's related to poverty. And probably some are based on, say, desire to, I guess, get what they want. So I'm not sure if there's a statistics based on that. I mean, statistics based on their motivation of these serious crimes. Just
Yeah, to
throwing out
Sean's
there.
point,
Thanks.
someone that steals to get steals to get their yacht, like that's because of want, not need, right? So like white collar crime is generally a want, not a need, and is not really punished the same way as violent crime. So that's my polite way of putting
Well,
the
violent crime,
go ahead.
I would just say violent crime is defined specifically as murder or non-negligent manslaughter, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, or simple assault. Anything outside of that, like vandalism, arson, these aren't considered, or like burglary, not considered violent crime.
If arson kills someone or hurts them significantly, I think it would be considered violent crime.
Yes,
Okay. So
it,
then
it would, but
I
if you
would agree
simply
with
burn down a building, yeah,
yeah.
or
Well,
set a car on fire in a protest, not
right.
violent crime, at least
Yeah.
by statistic standpoints.
Yep. Thanks for pointing that out. Um, any other comments for Dustin's comment? It's taken a long time to answer the violent crime over the last 50 years. It's working hard.
Well, I guess one point to that, as far as the poverty causing violent crime, burglaries or robberies, those type of things, which might be crimes of desperation, would not fall under violent crime.
Unless someone
A
gets hurt. Yeah.
armed assault, like if you beat someone and take money, that
Right.
would.
Right. Threatening and taking the money does not count as violent crime.
Aggravate
Or is it?
robbery, which is different than burglary. So
Okay.
robbery,
So if you threaten someone and you take their money, then it does count.
yes. Or if
Okay.
I say punch you in the face and steal your wallet, or beat you down and
Well,
take,
that's clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
The question is like, if I say I have a gun under my shirt and,
That's called simple assault. You can do
Okay.
that. That would, as long as the threat is there, then it's considered a violent crime.
Okay.
But if you just break into someone's house at night, or you bust into somebody's car,
Right.
not
That
violent
makes
crime.
sense to me as a distinction. I mean, that's a logical distinction to me.
Oh, it was
that
a rabbit hole to go down to see about how this works.
Cool. Any other comments for Dustin? I think we can go to Damaris. Hey, Damaris.
Hey, I've been thinking about a caution I wanted to make in the room. As we sit here in this space thinking about thinking, I felt this urgency to kind of caution and manage the way we use data with each other, because data can be manipulated to justify anything. Confirmation bias tells us that. I can find a stat to justify whatever attitude I want to take. And really, this came up for me as I was looking at the comments where someone talked about, well, I had a relative that was killed by an illegal immigrant. And I thought, this person didn't say that. But as I was thinking about that, my own experiences then become a body of data by which that I can use as a cudgel, right? That I can use to justify whatever I think. And as I've been watching the room, one of the things that I'm picking up is that, we spit out a stat and you can almost see a satisfied look come over the person who's throwing it out as if, okay, I've shut down any objections, right? And it worries me because um, these things that we're discussing ultimately boil down to a human being's experience. Likely we don't understand, especially in a way that's very close up and intimate. And it worries me, especially when we develop opinions, when we develop policy, and this data and the way we're using data keeps us at a safe distance where we can forget how little we really understand about other people's experiences. And so while we're in this room feeling very smart and very superior and almost using people as insects that we can dissect, I feel myself getting more and more, I don't know what the word is, but I can feel it in my chest. Um, this feeling of caution about the way we use data, whatever the topic is. It's about crime today. That by itself can be used to make ourselves feel important. And then add to that whatever data we're using, combined with whatever motives we have. I think it can cloud what we're doing, why we're doing, and when it boils down to human beings that we're looking at and values that we're trying to validate or justify.
Yeah, so
That's where peer review comes in, though. That's why we
What's
talk
that?
about this stuff. That's where peer review comes in. That's why we talk about it. I have my
I
stats, you come with
but
your stats.
but here's the problem with that. There are some um, groups or individuals that may not have access or be deemed important enough to be peer reviewed. And then when those individuals, for example, if a pygmy tribe somewhere on an island wanted to posit an opinion, but our science, especially our American science, doesn't deem them worthy of study, what happens to their experiential data? And because we can grab at a statistic, and again, I'm watching us banty around these stats, and and again, you can almost see a satisfied look come over people's faces when they posit something. And again, I'm making it up because I, of course, don't have the operation of anyone's mind except my own. I imagine what we're thinking is, I can't be challenged. My values are validated. My position is validated. And all I'm saying is we need to remember that for every position, there is polarity. For every piece of data, there is contrary data. If you can find people to find it, if people can find it and deliver it. So I just wanted to be cautious about the way we're using data and the way we're forming opinions.
do you feel,
Are you
Damaris?
pointing towards lived experience versus like just data mining, that type of
Yeah.
I'm
thing?
thinking data, I'm thinking data mining, I'm thinking personal experience, especially personal experience by groups that are less valued in the information marketplace.
Yeah, by the way, most scientists who are really good, and I'm saying there are terrible scientists, but really good scientists are humble. They will want to be challenged. They will, or accept challenge, and they will treat their findings as provisional. This is, philosophy of science 101.
But I'm
Uh,
watching the way we're interacting in the room.
well, yeah. Now,
And and again,
some of us,
we're a room full of really smart people,
no,
and we
but
all have our laptops out. And I
I,
as a gestaltist by training, all my alarms are going off,
yeah, but
inside me.
I don't treat these findings as anything else but data points, And I agree with you. The lived experience behind these data points are what matters. And if you can get into the lived experience, it will expose a lot more of what the world is about. The world is extremely complex, and having a couple of data points just gives you like a starting place to understand the world. It's not a
Or
complete.
or it becomes a cudgel that I can use to feel superior, to shut people
Where
down. And
where do
I'm
you
not making any
where do you
judgments
feel like
about
that
that.
happened, Damaris? Because it sounds like you feel like it did. I'm curious because I guess I'm curious if you feel like there are homogenous opinions here or that ideas aren't being challenged. I felt like we've been pretty consistently challenging opinions back and forth in different directions from diverse perspectives, and we're I think, at least I can speak for myself to transparently share my mind. My goal is to seek truth. I don't care whether or not I'm right or not, because if I come to a new truth, I'm now more right than I was before. The only time I'm ever truly wrong is if all of you can realize that I'm wrong and I refuse to admit it. And that's why I try to explain to everyone that seeking truth is way better than being right.
Let me say this, my
Yeah.
comments are no aspersion on anybody in the room. What I'm sitting here looking at is the process by which we're discussing. And again, given my background and training, my alarms are going off because, again, we're kind of throwing around these
Okay.
stats, and I
Can we
worry
do
that.
something different? I
Well,
mean,
let me
yeah,
finish what I was
okay.
going to say, because I think what also gets lost in the sauce is that having stats presupposes access to data. And that's not something we can take for granted. As you said, Gene, very astutely, by the way, that I can have my collection of data points, but experiential data tends to round that out. And a good scientist will balance those. And I don't hear a lot of that experiential weight being brought into the room, because I think if we bring it into the room, then we have to admit how ignorant we are. It's so much easier for us to rely on quantitative data. A
Mhm.
number is a number. And it's harder for us to lean into qualitative data, because to do that, we've got to admit how ignorant we are and how isolated we are from other people and how little we know about the people we're talking about. That's all I'm saying.
Damaris, what I hear you saying is kind of a criticism of the old, and I have criticism against this too, the whole facts don't care about your feelings type of approach, where because if we only point to the hard data that exists right now, we're not admitting that there's a lot of data out there that's a bit squishy or underreported or not out there. And so if we act as if we know the totality of everything that's out there, we can get this like arrogant sense that we know what's right, we know what's out there, when there's a lot of kind of unknown. And I think you're pointing towards a kind of more of a lived experience or type of approach where that is underreported. Is that kind of
Yes, and there's, I think, Garrett, you just talked about truth,
Hmm.
right? And as soon as I hear that, I think, well, I used to believe there's typically one set of facts and innumerable truths, right? So when you say I'm seeking truth, the question I want to ask is whose truth? From
The
what
truth about
standpoint?
objective reality.
But again, that even objective reality is subjective depending on the person who's looking at it.
So
And
you're a
all I'm saying,
postmodernist.
all I'm saying is that we need to contemplate that all of these opinions could be subject to polarity, could be subject to confirmation bias, could be subject just to our own human bias. And
Right.
so when we lean on them, especially if we're leaning on them to make ourselves feel superior, to shut other people down, to again kind of eliminate any challenges, that to me defeats the whole purpose of why this collection of super smart people are in the room thinking about thinking.
I would
Can I
agree with
please
you.
thank you? Can
Yeah,
I thank Damaris for what she's saying? I really appreciate your perspective because, uh, as we say here, we're together supposedly as a group seeking truth. And Damaris makes it clear that what is defined as truth, how society goes about finding truth, is a very managed phenomenon. For example, the New York Times will say on the cover, Americans respond to this issue in this way. And I always feel like talking back to New York Times and say, hey, I'm an American. Nobody asked me what I think. I'm not part of most of the data gathering. Living in a poor community, I'm not someone who, only recently did someone ever call me to ask my opinion about anything. So if you say a point of view or a social change, as reported, represents America or even reality, I'm sorry, but I have not been treated as part of that reality. The concept of gathering data to even report on a phenomenon leaves many people out. So that's not inclusive information gathering. And it can be peer reviewed to death. But for one thing, the people who are chosen to do peer review are generally people who are powerful parts of the existing paradigm. And the existing paradigm doesn't give a damn about people like me.
As you just said, Sherry, who are the peers? And I remember when I was in grad school, learning that a lot of these studies are actually done in the university space with students, right?
Right.
And I'm like, that's not a reflection of society at large. It just isn't. It just isn't. And again, if we're using this data as a cudgel against each other, to make myself feel superior, to make policy, all of those scenarios are profoundly dangerous.
And let's say we give people.
I also think we're engaging in a lot of self-deception, because to admit that even the most, quantitatively sound data can be flawed or could be incomplete, is to admit that we're ignorant, which is hard for super smart people to do.
Yeah,
I don't think hard, but we do it. We do it. And if we fail, you will tell us.
Gene,
okay, I will
calm
down.
I know where you're going, Gene, but calm down.
Okay.
Damaris, I think hold on, Sherry. Just give 1 second. So first of all, Sherry, I do think we're listening to you tonight. So you are getting your voice heard tonight. And the other thing I want to say, Damaris, is it sounds like you're trying to say that getting together as a group and trying to seek truth is completely fruitless, because how could we actually know the answer?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that at getting together as a group to seek truth needs to be done cleanly and holistically. And what that means in part is doing what really smart people hate doing, which is leaning into that which is ambiguous, leaning into that which is gray, leaning into that which is foreign to us. Because if I've got to lean into those gray, ambiguous, foreign places, then suddenly I'm not as smart as I want to think I am.
I didn't see any of that tonight.
How do you
I'm not laying that at anyone's feet. I'm speaking for
But
myself.
Damaris, you're saying your spidey sense is going off here and all the alarms are ringing, and I'm like, I haven't seen any of that. To Gene's point, I've seen kind of the opposite, as people saying, oh, let's learn about this. Oh, show me what you think. Show me your information. Show me your data. And we're comparing notes without getting, I don't see any of the hallmarks. And what you're describing, Damaris, is what I see everywhere else. Like, I see it all the time. Confirmation bias, we did a whole event on, and it's enemy number one of mankind, and everybody has it. And the only people that think they don't have it even worse than the rest of us.
And hear me when I'm not criticizing the group or your institute or any of those things. And when I say I hear alarms, I am hearing a bias for statistics.
Yeah.
As I sit here, I'm hearing that.
But how do you?
And I'm hearing very little acknowledgement of how imbalanced those statistics can be, how complete they can be, how bent and manipulatable they can be. And that's all I'm at. That's all I'm positing, that we need, if we're going to be a smart group of people seeking truth, we've got to tell the truth about data.
But I
Yeah.
said very clearly that
Well,
the
Gene, it's
first
not, I'm not
data
only
is
talking,
not valid.
but
We challenge each other.
Gene, sir,
Let's keep the
I'm not
emotions down.
accusing you. I'm not accusing you.
Yeah, I just
But
think
you can
Camaris,
Derek,
accuse
can I
us.
jump in?
You can say, you can point out what's
emotions,
wrong.
my friend.
Gene, I'm not
Gene.
accusing anyone. I'm not casting aspersions on the room. I'm just saying my alarm.
Let's go to the next.
go
Let's
off.
go to the
Can
next person
I
because we've been on this for 13
can I
minutes. If
jump
that's
in?
okay.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Okay, yeah. So I studied political science, and I feel like the statistics are, without without saying that, oh, it can be biased or whatever based on who's reporting it. And a lot of the times, whoever is doing study, they're supposed to divulge that information. Like if you have certain view, if you're from certain background, you're supposed to say so. And I think it goes without saying that numbers might not be all the way there compared to like what you will see day in and day out. And I live in Baltimore, and I work as a financial coach at a welding and CNC facility that trains people. And we deal with a lot of people who have crimes, criminal records, and we help them with getting their crimes expunged and stuff like that. So I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel like with numbers and statistics, that's where we can start talking about it. It's a starting point for a conversation and seeing where it can go. And I think that goes with the first person who said, who you brought up on empathy. I think looking at things past where you live and the environment that you're in, and just looking at the overall country. And I think that the current government should really look at the economy and how it's impacting people, and working on raising wages. Our wages have not been risen in like 30 years. And then you have people who are a paycheck away from homelessness. So things like that they can tackle to bring crimes down. So that's all.
Great. Derek, go ahead.
I hate trying to find the mute button. Yeah, I just want to say appreciate your that critique, Damaris. Just just try to keep it in mind. I don't take it as a personal attack. I think it's very valuable. If people can just let it sink and don't apply. Anyway, I'll get to what I was gonna say is to that point. Has anyone looked at the sort of criminality, poverty kind of cycle that a lot of people get trapped in, i.e., you get a lot of these crimes start off with just fines. Can't pay the fine, they bundle, they they coalesce, and then you get a criminal record and you get put in jail for it. You get put in jail, you can't go to work, your family suffers. Kids maybe have to drop out to, make some money some other type of way. Now you got a criminal record. Now it's hard to get another job, all that stuff. There's bail reform. We went through a big thing down here in Atlanta about bail reform because apparently if you commit a crime and you got enough money in your pocket or in your checking account, you're allowed to go home and continue your life. And it's just a minor inconvenience to go back to the court. If you don't have the money, you stay there. You can't call your boss. You've been gone for a week because you're locked up because you can't get a hearing. Now when you get out, you still got a trial. Now you don't got a job. It's just a cycle that continues. And I mean that's part of like I think that kind of texture could be an example of something that the data necessarily doesn't capture. It's more of a sort of a lived experience. And I always just invite people to not to say I don't know who does or doesn't, but actually spend time in these quote unquote poor communities and kind of like see how people necessarily live. I don't know who does or doesn't do that. I'm just saying like there are sort of like these kind of like systems that kind of like keep people in poverty, and they're just good people, just like us, who may have the means to necessarily avoid these kind of like pitfalls that kind of continue on and spiral out of control. So just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Yeah, agreed. Anyone have comments for Derek?
Go,
think-
Derek.
I
Yeah.
wanted to add to the whole thing. I was gonna type it in chat. It's really quick. I think you can't get a productive conversation from using only anecdotal evidence, and you also can't get a productive conversation from using only statistics. I think in a debate or in Socratic questioning or in conversation, you have to have a little bit of both.
Yeah,
And
I
that's all
agree
I want to say.
100%, Kate. And that's what I've been trying to do as a facilitator is, talk about how the FBI statistics are different than the National Crime Victimization Survey and how, we should have empathy with people who we don't live with day to day. Like when I was young, the guy that sat next to me in Spanish class, like guarded a pot farm with a shotgun full of rock salt, right? That's where I grew up. So have I interacted with people like this? Yeah. Do I now? No, I don't. But I think having empathy for people and understanding where they're coming from, to Damaris's point, is super important. But I agree with you, Kate. I think you need both the quantitative as well as the qualitative. And by bringing them together, you get that 360-degree view. Well, bringing them together with diverse perspectives, which is what I feel like we have here tonight. We have, and I'm not going to say who, where, but we have very diverse political perspectives. And I appreciate that. So, yeah.
I'll give one comment to Derek. Derek, I always appreciate hearing from you and your perspectives on this. I think they're pretty nuanced. I think, and I can appreciate the bail reform changes that have happened recently, and that there's a real problem there with the different impacts of people who have money versus people that don't. I think it's one of those, there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs type of situations where the other side of it is you get people who there are genuinely violent criminals who then go out and they don't have to show up for their court hearing until later and then are repeat offenders, and we see this both ways. So there's no silver bullet to a lot of these type of situations. That's all.
Agreed. No silver bullets, but I think there is more fair and less fair, and we should strive for more fair whenever possible. And that the answer of exactly what is more fair is a little bit nuanced. But actually, I'll put the as a plug for the FTI, which I don't do very often, but I'm going to try to do for a minute, is to say that we have an FTI Better Decisions bot that I put together using the six intentions, so you can put any question into it and it'll try to tell you the ethical thing to do in that scenario. So you can ask it what's more fair and see if you agree with it. And if you think you can stump it, tell me the question you asked it and what the answer was. So that said, Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, the whole risk versus reward thing, how many false convictions and, false positives, false negatives you're going to tolerate, Do you want to let how many, guilty go free, so to speak, rather than convict the one innocent person? That's a tough question. Regarding stats, this is a subject close to my heart. First off, I think everybody should just presume that out of the principle of charity, we all come to the table in good faith. Unless you can prove otherwise, just assume everyone's looking out for everyone's best interest and is being honest and behaving fairly. Statistical analysis is a pretty highly developed area of math, and that's a blessing and a curse. Because if you read any primary research papers that do statistical analysis, I mean, this stuff gets deep, right? Which also means that the general population can't understand it. Which also means that the people who report on this stuff can't represent accurately what's being done or the methods employed. So when I was talking about, and first, statistics, the idea here is it's an attempt to de-bias, de-emotionalize, for a word I just invented on the spot, which has costs, but it has benefits. But at the same time, it's always going to be a simplification, which means you never capture everything. So it's a tool that you're using for a specific purpose. And things like averages, right? You can put hot coals down the front of my pants and an ice block down the rear, and on average, I'm comfortable, right? That does not capture my situation. So I think, their stats in a nutshell, at least in one point. But stats are bad in a vacuum. And when I said peer review, I don't necessarily just mean in the journals. I mean, that's what we're doing here. I say, hey, look at this stat I found. Garrett says, well, look at this stat that I found here on ChatGPT. Gene finds his stats. Then we combine with some anecdotes and whatnot. And I mean, this is the same thing the professionals do in the peer review. You could say, somebody says, hey, I did this analysis. I used the latest and greatest with the best set I could find with the money I had and the available resources, and then the other professionals attack it. Well, that's what we're doing. And when attack it, I don't mean attack the person or the ego or anything. We're trying to find out, hey, what's capturing the best picture so we have actionable intelligence to get a better result? And if we do get a different result, how do we even measure if it's a better result or a worse result? And now we're talking about principles. So it's just like free speech, right? The cure to bad speech is more speech. That's the cure to bad data is more data and more discussion of the data so we can identify the crappy data. Hopefully that leads to nuance, even if we end up disagreeing in the end, which is okay too. Thank you. I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, I think your point about most people not understanding statistics is super important, which is why I think it should be taught in schools. But I would kind of take issue with the idea that it's too complicated to understand. You can just have a clear line of which, something is statistically significant with a certain chance of being right. Like it's 95% likely that this is true, within a certain variance. And that is an understandable concept that it's 95% likely that this percentage of 90% is true plus or minus 5%. Like people can understand that, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
you can boil statistics down to that confidence level. That's like one of the points of, research is to boil it down to that confidence level so that it is understandable. But we have to teach people even that a lot of people probably get confused by. And so, if that's confusing, we need to teach that to people. And by the way, I got the number of total of crime statistics since the 70s. Crime was high in the 70s, spiked through the late 80s and 90s, and it's basically dropped consistently since the 90s, the early 90s peaks. Just FYI. So, except for coronavirus had a spike. Any other comments on that topic? Then we'll go to Stephen.
Yeah, maybe a new topic.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gene, did you want to go on the prior topic?
Yeah, on your topic, it's not just statistics. When you're doing a study, what is the theoretical framework that you're working in? How are you, what do you want to measure? How are you going to go about measuring? There's a whole bunch of things to doing research well. Statistics is just one part of it. And when I did survey research, my job was to create tables and correlations and all that other stuff in percentage. But I would start with reading the results, reading what people were saying, and finding the nuances as best I could, which was always very limited. So I don't think it's just a question of statistics. It's a question of having the desire to come up with something right, and of course, being challenged and all this other stuff is the other end of it. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I also see Damaris's point in that if you choose your method of gathering data points to be biased in the first place, you can end up with statistics that prove something true that turns out to be false because you have bad assumptions in your data collection.
Exactly.
And that's why I think that the peer review process is so important because if someone does and there were studies saying that coronavirus vaccines caused more harm than they did good. And so we did an event on coronavirus vaccines and I took the entire globe's coronavirus, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, all causes death. And it turns out you're something like twice as likely to die if you don't get a coronavirus vaccine. So across all causes of death. So that kind of debunked all the anti-vaccine rhetoric. in my opinion, but there's still anti-vaxxers out there, right? Didn't solve the problem, no silver bullets, to Sean's point. So I just want to say that I see, Gene, your perspective, that the peer-reviewed statistical side, but I also see Damaris is that if someone does it in bad faith, they can, find the answer that they were looking for the whole time based on their confirmation bias. And unfortunately, a lot of people do that. And I think, Gene, you're agreeing with that. So it sounds like we might have agreement there. Not sure if Damaris agrees. She looks like she's thinking about it. Trying to find common ground, Damaris.
Can I say I agree with Damaris's doubt in this respect? I have seen, and you spoke about COVID as one example. There are many examples in which there are statistical reportings about outcomes of various policies, of all kinds of things. And the question is always, to my mind, who paid for this information reporting, and do they have agenda? Because in fact, most scientific studies are funded studies, and most of them are not funded by the government, or not that I trust the government either, but that they're funded by interests of profit-making interests. They fund most science. That's a fact, and that doesn't mean that scientists are not trustworthy people. In fact, this whole group is about looking for the truth. And I'm pretty shocked, I have to say, if in our interest in looking for the truth, we accept as a given any claim truths that arise out of a system that we can't be confident is not manipulated. The story about the world, the story about us as a people in the US and around the world, foreign policy, etc., is continuously manipulated by people who put billions of dollars into altering the story to conform to the interests of the people who own the system. I don't know how any of us could possibly believe that the reporting of facts in our system is not greatly manipulated by moneyed interests. They call that capture. Regulatory agencies are captured, well known, captured by corporate. In fact, the FDA is funded by, well, just want to say, this is the last thing I'll say. The FDA is 70% funded by the pharmaceutical industry. If we know that, we should question what comes out as far as reporting on that. And I just hope that we'll think about what Damaris said with the recognition that all our sources of information
Try to finish
are
your thought, Sherry.
possibly biased. That's all. They may be biased.
Just
go ahead, Gene.
1 second. There are journals that people who do social science research publish in, and these journals require you to say whether there's any possibility of a conflict. So if you read stuff on the internet and it's not in a journal, and somebody's, and some company has financed it, etc., you have no idea. But a lot of what I follow, and I'm becoming more of a science junkie than anything else, is reading at the beginning, what are is a drug company involved? What have they done? Is a prison system involved? Who's the government behind it? So all of the stuff has to be disclosed, and if it's not disclosed, it's a scandal. So I don't agree with you that everything is corrupt. Yes, there are, and people are people, of course. Okay, I'll end there.
Thanks, Gene. Yeah, Sherry, there's a good statistic by a Princeton and I think Northwestern study that said before bribery was legalized in our country by Citizens United, that only the opinions of the top 10% of income earners were considered by members of Congress. And so that's pretty discouraging.
I don't believe that's changed. I don't see.
Well, I'm sure it's gotten worse. It's much more narrow than 10% now. So because now that we've legalized bribery, like money is what talks and what walks. So
be aware of that when you look for information. Always be aware that if it comes to you through a mainstream or a popularized source, it is very likely that it's altered to some degree. And by the way, Gene, in response to your facial expression, which I understand, I understand the desire to believe that things that go through channels and those channels claim that it's vetted information, we would like to believe that it is vetted in a way that moves us toward reality and toward truth. However, medical journals will, the editors of medical journals, and this is the editor of the Lancet, has said that he's discouraged, but he kept on being the editor, shockingly. He said that, in fact, medical journals have devolved into information laundering operations for the pharmaceutical industry. That's a quote from the editor of the Lancet.
I will
So,
say two things, Sherry, and I know a doctor that used to do medical research, like drug research from the drug companies, and he stopped doing it because the drug companies came to him and said, okay, here's the drug and here are the results you're going to get. And he goes, how can you tell me the results? I don't know the results till I do the study. And they said, no, you don't understand. These are the results you're going to get if you want to, you want us to pay you for the study.
that's
And so
right.
he stopped doing studies after that.
Yep.
But how many doctors can afford to do that?
You want
So,
to continue to be funded, you better get the results we expect.
and we should all be worried about that. Now, the point about the FDA being funded by drug companies, though, I'll come in the opposite direction and say they get funded in a way that is not biased. The drug companies paying the doctors is an area of bias, but the drug companies all give a certain amount to fund FDA studies that should be more objective. So there is actually a good process as part of the FDA. But I will agree with you that there's a lot of corruption in the drug industry. So. Stephen, go ahead.
Yes, I want to throw in a word for wisdom. I think that's what seems to be missing a lot in our culture in general. And this situation now is just seems to be just full of what I would call unwisdom. I could have never imagined in my lifetime that public policy would be, advertised through a social chat that's basically owned by the President of the United States. It's just unbelievable. And I'm not saying that we've always exercised wisdom in my life history anyway. I've seen a lot of maybe unwisdom, I guess, but it just seems to be so rampant now. And there is no reflection, or apparently no reflection, on issues of great importance, not only to this country, but to the rest of the world. I mean, it's just on a whim of somebody just getting on a social media, outlet and just proclaiming public policy, and nobody seeming to challenge that very much. I can't believe that that our Congress has devolved to where it's just letting all this go on, and the courts, and that's what I think is needed so much, is just a little modicum of wisdom in all of this.
Yeah, I agree, Stephen. And defining wisdom is a big deal. And I would argue that modern philosophy has lost its way on the path of wisdom. That's why in the FTI we call wisdom preventing significant unnecessary harm and increasing happiness and decreasing harm, which I would argue I think is a good definition of wisdom, although people are welcome to challenge that if they want to. But if we use that definition of wisdom, we at least have a common definition that we can talk about wisdom. But I have a little formula, which is that evil is equal to good plus misunderstanding, meaning that all the people that we see doing evil think they're doing good, or they will convince themselves they're doing good. They just have a misunderstanding about something or many things, and that causes us to realize that they're doing evil. So,
yeah, it goes all the way back to Plato.
Yeah, and Socrates, right? Like trying to say, all I know is I know nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't mean that he knew literally nothing. He meant we have to start realizing that there's lots of stuff we don't know and be conscious of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be great. And we used to have this in our university college system, that there be at least a semester of philosophy required. And we're closing down philosophy departments around this country. And I'm not saying academic philosophy, because I've been in academic philosophy. has all the, and there's certainly problems in some academic philosophy, I think now, but if we could just get back to being at least what I would call with some reflective, what I'm wanting to do, let's say in policy, for instance, what is going to be, perhaps, as best we can tell, the long-term, aspects of that, and how will it affect positive and negative, and just being a little more thoughtful when we're throwing out these policies in the way we seem to be doing it now. That's kind of what I would call by a modicum of wisdom, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I think, that's why we focus on practical philosophy, things that add value to people's lives, which I've learned academia calls positive psychology, which is what I think should be taught in every school. How do you live a more happy life and teach others to be
Mhm.
happy as well?
Yeah, I agree.
We're always looking for a something common amongst us, and the thing that we have in common is we're wrong about something. We're wrong about something, and we should be searching ourselves for the thing that we're wrong about instead of spending our time pointing out how others are wrong.
Yeah.
If people spent more time looking at themselves and fixing that than chasing down the other,
Well,
I think we'd find a lot more common ground.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Alan. Sometimes it's hard to see our own blind spots. And that's why in the FTI, as members, we surround ourselves with people who want to seek truth and we help each other do that. And it's one environment where unsolicited feedback is encouraged because we all want to be the best version of ourselves and seek truth. And so we help each other get unstuck from our blind spots and sort of navigate life. And that's a really nice thing that members have said they really appreciated. And if you want to learn more about membership, I'll put that chat in that link in the chat again as well. There's no fee for membership, just to be clear. It's not a money-making venture. Damaris.
Thank you. As I was noticing the reaction, right, of my little itty bitty harmless opinion, but as I thought about it more, it's not the science that I think is flawed. I think we are the machines that are flawed. We are the thing that the science gets sieved through, and we are flawed. And just some observations I've made in the room tonight. And again, these are not judgments, they're just observations. So the first thing the one gentleman said as he defended process was presume virtuous intent. And I immediately, my brain went immediately off. And I know what it's based on. I know what those alarms are caused by in me. Race, gender, immediately go off. And so I'm not angry at him or even critical of him as I sit there and think about he can't know what I know about being in this body, this skin, this gender. But again, it's an example of how the science is fine. The data is fine, but we are flawed. And these things move through us. And especially when they're used to inform public policy, they can do a lot of harm. The other observation, when we talked about violent crime, where did we go? We went immediately into poverty. We went immediately into the urban landscape, when at the same time, we are witnessing what may be the most historic criminal enterprise perpetrated by billionaires on private islands, not in the ghetto, but by the people who are holding levers of power. One of the things that I know about, and this will be my end here, one of the things that I know about doing my inclusion work is that systems of supremacy tend to very quietly inform how business runs, how leadership runs. This aversion to conflict or aversion to a divergent thought, as evidenced by just a few minutes ago, again, is part of Western philosophy. There's one authority, and if we diverge from it, again, everyone wanted to jump to defend it. And I'm not attacking any of you, or I'm not attacking the room. I'm just positing the potential that what we cling to as absolute has so many limits on it. Can't
Yeah,
we
I
all?
don't think we should
Especially,
cling.
I made Jean nervous. I've stressed Jean out, and I apologize. I feel like I
I
stressed you
mean,
out.
I think Gene might be a scientist, and so seeking truth is near and dear to scientists, and
Yeah, I
so
I hear what you say. I hear a lot of what you say, and I
Mhm.
have a response. And I think this dialogue is great. And
Absolutely.
I don't see half of what you're saying. We're all flawed
mhm.
as human beings. Absolutely. The world is much more complicated than anyone can possibly imagine. As I go through life, I discover new things about myself all the time. I discover new things about people. This is a wonderful world we live in. So you're right. Science is extremely limited. But the reason we have these conversations is to explore. And I love it. I mean, I love it. You're making me nervous, but I love it. I'm getting excited.
Why, Jean? Why? I'm harmless.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
harmless.
One thing I heard. Okay, let me.
I'm a pussycat, really, Jean.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. I don't think this is about. We're all like working at two levels. We have an emotional level. We're glad to be here, and we also have an intellectual level, and we're looking for truth, and I think everybody examines themselves a lot more than you give us credit for. But having said that, one of the things that somebody said was we all have different truths.
Hmm.
Now, I think that if we're going to be living in a society
Hmm.
and a country that's basically democratic and where there has to be some level of trust, as Garrett said, that I was born in a different in a different century, and I can't understand what's going on now with the ultra left, canceling and all this other stuff, and the ultra right, saying there's multiple truths. This is completely bizarre. What if we're going to be living, getting back to a belief in democracy? We have to think at some level there's one truth. And if we've given up on that, then we're never going to have a democracy. We're never going to have a pluralistic society. And that one truth is very, very hard to get to. It requires constant work and constant examination. That's all.
Jean, may I
Please go
quick?
ahead.
See, Jean, I love you. I do. I do. I love you. However, so know that this conflict is all love. But I adamantly disagree that we have to arrive at a common truth. I think
No,
that's
we will never, but we should
I don't think we should
strive.
try to. I think we should I think the truth lives in both and, not in one, not in an or, but in an and. That's where I think the truth lives. And it's a malleable thing. It's a malleable thing. And so when I recognize that I'm making you nervous, and when you acknowledge that I'm making you nervous, I so want to ask you, if there is no universal truth, if there is this ambiguous place of both and, what would that mean for you? What would that mean is that scary? That seems scary to you when to me that feels so natural. What's frightening to me is the idea that there is a single lens. That totally doesn't compute with me.
I think that you're right. There are multiple viewpoints,
Mhm.
and it requires work to
To hold them
understand
all.
to understand multiple viewpoints.
Mhm.
At any point in time, we're completely imperfect, and we're going to only see so much, but we can widen it, and
Mhm.
we can get wider, and we can get wider, and it can be a journey that we all go on.
But what
But
if
to
the work
understand,
isn't, what if the work is not coming to a single truth? What if the work is being
no, no,
able
no.
to hold
But
multiple truths?
ultimately we have to decide on uh, as in a society, an elected society, we're going to vote for, or the people who represent us have to vote for a particular policy.
Why?
And that policy is going to, what?
Our own
That's
government's
what,
not built that way. That's why
well,
you have
all my
co-equal,
life.
that's why you have co-equal branches of government,
No,
so
no,
that
no,
there
no.
can be
Yeah,
disagreement.
you're absolutely right. But ultimately, there's going to be some decision made that we're either going to defund ICE or continue ICE or do something. A decision has to be made. And the more that we understand all the things going into that decision, and some people love it because they think ICE is wonderful, and some people hate it. They all have different points of view. But if we're going to ultimately come up with a decision, it would be best if everybody understood how we got to that decision.
Who's
And that
qualified to do that? What's
what
who does that, Gene? Who does that?
we do
Who's
that every day. Either we show up for elections or we don't.
and
Either we
we disagree, and ultimately we have to learn how to hold multiple truths. That's where the truth is. There can't be one. There has never been one.
So Damaris, do you think that if three philosophers stand in front of a wall and two of them say the wall doesn't exist and they walk through it, that they're able to walk through it?
I want to know when you ask me that, a couple of you mentioned Socrates and Plato, and I've studied them, but they weren't the only ones. They were the Western ones. They were written. There were so many others. There were so many others that weren't from the West who were equally true. And so I'm not
so
criticizing.
bring that to the
No, I'm
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 conversation.
not
just asking a very
criticizing.
simple question is, does the wall exist and will those two philosophers bump into it?
I think you have to you're going to criticize me. And I think the question, I don't
I
know that
don't
the
need to,
question,
Damaris. You'll
I don't
answer it for yourself and
I
people will
don't
make
know
their
that
own
the question
judgments.
is asked in good faith. And I
Mhm.
want to know, are we talking? There's so many questions I have about your question before I would answer it.
Could I
So
ask
many
something?
Can I
questions.
say one thing? Can I
I
say
think
one thing?
I think the question is the wall a high wall or a low wall?
And
And you got
and
and you
let's talk
got two
about
people saying it's high and one person saying it's low. That's the kind of truth you're talking about.
So I have a
we're
question.
talking
Okay,
about show. What was his name?
right.
Showing dollars. The cat. The cat. Was the cat there? The cat in the box?
Schrodinger's cat.
The
Yes.
We actually did an event on Schrodinger's cat and quantum theory, and there are good explanations for how that type of thing works. So, um, it's actually understandable. It's not as complicated as it's made out to be by scientists who are determinists and want to think that there's nothing more than determinism causing you to make a decision one way or another. But the wall is a 10-foot brick wall, and I would argue it is objective reality and it bends its will to no person, even if the majority of people don't agree that the wall is there. The wall is still there and you can't walk through it. And so it's not a complicated question. It's really very simple.
No, I think
But
there's
that's
a
not what public
difference
policy does.
between a physical science and sociological fiction because we are talking about
Correct.
which is a fiction of human being.
Mhm.
So these are two different realms of truth.
I agree,
We
and
need
that's
to,
where I
yeah.
would say there's not different definitions of truth. There's different opinions, and there's objective reality. objective reality bends its will to no person. That wall is objective reality. It doesn't change for anyone, no matter who agrees that it exists or doesn't. It doesn't care. It will be there. You could try to drive a car through it, but you're going to crash, right? And so the objective reality doesn't change no matter what you believe, no matter what your opinion is. But if you say you like chocolate ice cream and tomorrow you say it's vanilla, well, no one can challenge that. That's your opinion.
But here's the thing the flaw, that the alarm that goes off when I hear that is, one, who is deciding, who's in a position to name what that objective reality is? And for me, it suggests that it's an on or an off, it's a binary. And I'm sorry, and I'm informed, I'm culturally informed. I completely would claim that. As a woman, as a Black person in America, I can think of so many examples where the truth that I hear, the one gentleman, and he was so sincere, and I appreciate his sincerity, to presume virtuous intent was the very first notion he made. And I thought immediately, no, I can't make that presumption. And is he right or am I?
So what would be the alternative to trusting that people have good intentions until you get to know them better? So suppose you don't know someone.
That's not what he posited. That's not what you're changing the premise.
Well,
The
that was how
premise
I
that he
interpreted
made.
what he said, because I know Carrie fairly well. Now, you don't know Carrie probably from
I don't.
Adam. So, to be fair, you may have made an assumption that may not be accurate. And Carrie can tell us which of us was more accurate if he's still here.
All I know is that he used it to lead a
No,
discussion
he's not.
about science, right? And that we should trust it. As again, all I'm saying, and I'm not criticizing him or even his explanation, which was sincerely offered. All I'm saying is that there is always polarity. Always. Always.
If I can jump in here, I
Yeah.
feel like you keep moving the poll, Ms. Price. Whenever somebody says up, you say, oh, down. And I think
That's
factually,
polarity. That's polarity.
okay, so why don't we just say we agree to disagree, right? Because instead of injecting stuff and trying to this whole meeting is paused because of this argument, and I just feel like it's not really being productive at this point.
Oh, I
And
think it is. If you need me to, if you'd prefer me to remove, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
But you're also, but the facilitator also said that this was a space where divergent thought could coexist. And I think my opinion's relevant because I'm arguing the premise on which a lot of the policies that in this case dictate how we treat crime. I'm challenging the standard by which that's measured. But again, if the
I want
room
to
needs
let
if the
Warren
room
go
needs-
because we've been on this topic for a long time at this point. So
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. I won't take too much time. I was actually happy to hear Damaris just use the word crime. And I just wanted to kind of get back to that topic of
Sure.
our conversation tonight. So in the chat, I posted a link to a map, and it's now kind of a bit up from the bottom because lots of other things have been posted. But if you pull the map up, and it takes a couple minutes to load, it's a bit slow. What it shows is it's using data from the City of Oakland, California Police Department. Oakland, since I know people are scattered across the country and perhaps beyond the country, Oakland is the third largest city in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's across San Francisco Bay from San Francisco itself. It has a population of about 450,000. And what the map shows are reported crimes to the Oakland Police Department for the 7-day period ending yesterday. And in my opinion, this is just way too much crime. It's not a statistical analysis of anything, just reports. Some of it's violent crime, some of it's not violent crime. in there are about 80 motor vehicle thefts. In my opinion, for a city the size of Oakland, that's a lot of motor vehicle thefts in 1 week. Oakland is like the neighboring city to where I grew up years ago, so I've been familiar with it across my lifetime. This isn't anything new for Oakland. If I were to look 4 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 35 years ago, it would be much the same thing. And it just goes on. And there have been liberal mayors, conservative mayors, more liberal mayors, actually, different administrations in California, in the country, and crime just goes on. And it's a lot of crime. And the people who get impacted the most, in my opinion, are the people who are in the more crime-ridden, in general, the poorer parts of Oakland, and they're the ones who are most likely to be victims of the crime that just continues to take place there. I don't know what the answer is. Lots of things have been tried over the years. Things have gone right, things have gone wrong. But I just want to come back to this idea that, you know what, we've got a lot of crime taking place.
I think rehabilitation of people in prison is a good starting point. Trying to teach them how to reincorporate into society, get a valuable skill set, be able to get a job, to the point that someone made earlier about once you have a criminal record, it's really hard to get a job. That puts someone in a death spiral of like, what am I going to do other than crime if I can't get a job? So you limit people's choices by punishing them instead of teaching them how to reincorporate back to society and giving them social roots and giving them, people who they have positive relationships with in society that will look up to them as like someone who can actually do the right thing. My 2 cents.
Just, I actually have no particular comment about that. I've seen that, and that I think that's been tried in Oakland in bygone years. I don't think it is so much now. I've seen it tried in various kind of gang-ridden areas. I think sometimes it's been successful, sometimes not. It's not something I know a lot about. My focus has just been on, there is a lot of crime taking place, and we need to come up with something effective to do about it. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, we are at like a something like since the 1990s, a low end of crime. Like crime has been dropping since the early 90s is what it turned out. So we're in a pretty good spot. We want to get better. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't want any crime, but until we get to utopia, like we're in a good spot.
No, but Garrett, I would push back on that. You know what I'm showing is the week that ended yesterday. And there were
Yeah.
330 crimes in one city of medium size.
Yeah.
And a
I'm
lot
not
of these are
suggesting we stop trying to fight crime, Warren, not at all. Like the opposite. I think we should keep trying to fight crime and we should do it better. And I think we're capable of doing it better. But I also think that if you watch the news or you choose a place like Oakland as the place that you're looking at, it's going to look worse than if you take a national average. Now, we should be trying hard to help Oakland because it does have higher crime. And that was my point earlier about like helping people get, not have the socioeconomic challenges that have been shown to be causal to crime. So, if we can help people socioeconomically, give them higher paying jobs, not give them, but help train them so that they can do higher paying jobs, then you reduce a lot of the causes of people getting into crime, and then, giving good role models. There's lots of like ways of fighting crime, which we didn't get into. If I had done a presentation, then I would have gone into that type of stuff most likely. But I'm trying a different approach.
I agree with all of what you just said, except I just don't feel like we're at a point to say, hey, we're making progress, not as big a problem as it used to be. I think it's just still too big a problem to, not focus on that itself.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we should still focus on it, but I'd love to hear from Mary because we're about to wind down and we haven't heard from her yet. And I'd love to go Mary and then Deborah, so that we can let them both speak because I don't think Deborah's spoken yet either.
Yeah, I just wanted to say generally I support Trump right now, and I had been more left leaning and I moved right. And the reason why is for several reasons, but it's particularly important to discuss what's important this evening, which is policing. I care for Trump's involvement with the Federal Reserve and local police departments. He treats them with dignity. He has general natured goodness to them. He's good natured to them. He's a positive person and he cares for their well being. I do feel that people need to support the officers and the reserve and the military in general on the federal level. And I feel that that is a positive aspect of Donald Trump's administration. The negativity that is being produced against Donald Trump is horrifying. The left are closed minded. They are cancel culture this, cancel culture that. They didn't solve crime. So far, the right apparently didn't solve it either. But Trump is not being offensive when he's trying to assist the officers. He's trying to help the Army, Navy, all of the federal officers as well. And I don't understand why all the shaming of Trump, the hate of Trump. He is doing the best job he can in the regards to this topic. Specifically, too, he just passed some legislation and an executive order that allowed for addiction therapy to go through to help out people to prevent crime. He's trying to work with the homeless, and I disagree with Trump because it's a cornucopia. You don't always agree with the president you support. I would like to have the homeless to be more supported, to be honest, and that's a private matter of mine. But I feel that the left are horribly bigoted, horribly angry, and horribly negative, and I support Trump in regard to local police officers and their treatment.
Thanks, Mary, for sharing. I think it's interesting. I do think that Trump tries to support the police. But you said something interesting. You said you feel like he's a very positive person. I checked that from a fact check perspective, and actually his tweets use negative words 12 times as often as positive words. So I think you may want to look at just stepping back and looking at like whether or not he really is more positive or more negative overall.
Can I
Of course.
counter that?
Sure.
When I spoke, I said he is extraordinarily positive in regard to the officers.
I
He
see.
treats them like human beings, and I said that specifically. He is not positive always. I agree with you on that
Okay.
most definitely, but he
Yeah.
knows how to treat an officer like a human being.
Yeah.
What about the January 6th officers? Trump didn't treat them very well there.
Well, I agree with that at times, but at the same time, if you go back and look at some of the interviews with them, they still agree with Trump and a lot of them still support him.
I'm curious why you think he wasn't as supportive of the officers that day. Mary, if you're willing to
Oh, I
share.
thought you were asking them. I
No, I
haven't
was
done
asking
enough
you,
of the
Mary.
research. I had a cop father, and I'll have to do more research. I'll use ChatGPT, of course,
Yeah.
but I read limited amounts of interviews with the officers that day. I read some of the Congress people's interviews, and it's a mixed variable. Like there are people that despise Trump who are serving as officers, and people that stood by him.
Yeah. I guess what is your thought on like on you do you feel like well, you mentioned the homeless point. So let me let Deborah go and then Jennifer and then we'll kind of wind down. Thanks for sharing, Mary. Deborah, you're on mute.
Hi, everybody.
No, sorry,
Um,
Sherry, it's Deborah's turn.
hi,
Oh, I'm sorry.
everybody.
Go ahead. Sorry, Deborah, your name didn't light up, so I thought it was Sherry. So go ahead. Sherry was lighting up.
Okay,
Go ahead.
okay. All right. Now, maybe most of you don't know Trump personally. I don't know Trump personally, but my dad knew Trump personally, which may or may not be of interest to you. My father actually went to the same high school that he went to. So I can only say that my father had a good education. I assume Trump did as well. I'm sure, Trump does some negotiations. Maybe they learned that in the military academy. Maybe they didn't. I don't really know. Um, I have witnessed violence on the street, unfortunately. I have known people who've known people who were murdered. My mother had a student of hers who, unfortunately, terrible things happened and she was murdered when she was still in high school. And we've had other people in the neighborhood who've been, murdered. I've had just people I run into on the bus who tell me they were beat up on the street. Their sister, elderly sister, was beat up on the street. I live in New York City, if that's not obvious. So I've walked by on the street where there's drug addicts and they're all lighting up and, doing their drug activities. And I'm reading about how there is just these drug programs for these help the drug addicts out by passing out more drugs on this. So they go in, they get their drugs from this office, and then they go out and they do their drugs. And I don't know if this is something that federal has jurisdiction over or only state and local, but it just doesn't help. I've been on the street near my office in the middle of the day in the summer. There was a very, attractive young woman worker leaving her office, and this guy just grabs her by the hair, yanks her head really back, does it several times. And I'm by myself. I'm about to call 911, and finally he lets her go. So I've seen a lot of things. I've been on the bus. I've met myself with homeless, crazy, drugged out people screaming on the subway as well. So I've had it with the crime. And it really has affected me personally, where I don't go out at night. I don't do too much. I'm single, so I don't have anyone to escort me. It's just very frustrating. And, when I first moved into New York City, we had with Giuliani and Bloomberg, and they were very good mayors, and I felt safe. I felt safe after September 11 when we had a lot of National Guard around because of the terrorism. That's when I felt the most safe. And I agree with the other person who spoke before me at length about how Trump supports the military and the cops and all that. I do appreciate that. I appreciate that he's trying to help people. I also feel that sometimes he doesn't have a good manner and like you say, he can be nasty. I would agree. And I just think, Tim, but I really just want to root out fraud and corruption. Government fraud, government corruption. Well, obviously, we need money in this country and we're in debt. So let's try to eliminate the corruption so we can reduce our debt. I think that's a good plan.
I'm
But
curious,
is it
I'm curious, Deborah, do you think that that giving the president gold bars to get tariffs removed is considered corruption?
that he wants to
Would
remove the
you
tariffs?
consider if a president was given gold bars and then the president then removed tariffs, would that be corruption?
And well, if he removed tariffs, so you're
Yeah, in
saying he
exchange for
accepted a
getting gold
bribe.
bars from a country. So the country gives him gold bars and then he removes the tariffs from that country. Would that be corruption?
You might say it is, or you might say it's a negotiation strategy to try to get an ally. But I just don't know how smooth that's going to work with people. At some point, people
But I
are going to
mean,
get frustrated.
how would you define corruption?
Corruption is taking a school system, a school employee taking Metro cards or little gift bags that were supposed to go to the students, and they're using it for their car.
So
They're
it would
buying
be a
a
person
car,
in
they're going to
power.
Atlantic City.
It would
They're
be a
misusing funds.
it would be
Exactly, misusing
a
funds.
person in power enriching themselves with in order like basically enriching themselves because of their position of power. Is that a fair general assertion?
Yes, if he is enriching himself at the cost of not, hopefully in the future, getting an ally to help us when we need military power or we need a favor. But
Well,
it's
I
a
mean,
it's a long shot to say they're going to give us a favor soon. So therefore it all works out in the end. It's a long shot, like you'd say.
yeah, I
I
would call
think that's
that
fair.
yeah, more than a long shot. So that is a real example, except Trump also got a gold watch from the Swiss. And then from the Middle East, he got a $750 million plane, which we're going to spend as taxpayers $1 billion to equip, even though he'll never use it while he's president. It won't actually be equipped until after he leaves office. So I'm not sure if you're aware of those things, but I would say if you want someone that's against corruption, it's really important to, think about whether or not Trump is really standing for anti-corruption. The New York Times did an estimate that he's enriched himself by $1.4 billion since he got into office. And again, not trying to convince you of anything. I just want to share some like research that I've encountered over time, because you're against corruption, and I think it's important to recognize like who is and is not corrupt, and if that's an important topic for you. And by the way, they don't hand out drugs in New York City. What they do is they hand out syringes, and they do that because clean syringes prevent the spread of disease, and it reduces the number of people that die from drug deaths. So that was, I think, a misunderstanding that someone probably
They
told
have
you.
they have methadone clinics, don't they? Aren't they
They have
handing out drugs?
Narcan, which reduce like reverses overdoses, but certainly not heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, any of that. Like, if they're giving out
Okay.
anything, it's to reduce dependency on drugs.
It's just giving out the syringes, and it's the
Yeah.
same thing as giving out condoms to the high school students. And you could say it's encouraging promiscuity, or you could say no, it's preventing pregnancy. So I see your point, and it's just like a crazy society that we are stuck with. And we have all this depression, all this mental illness, all these people not feeling supported. They grow up in dysfunctional families. You have people who are the kids are, in foster care, and then they have a tough life. You have other people who are just on drugs and or whatever. You have people who are criminal. You have all the gangs that came in the country. You
Yeah,
have
there are lots
gangs
of
that
bad things
kill
going on.
people.
I think it's important to look at, and I would encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and look at the big ugly bill, the big beautiful bill, depending on your perspective, and what impact that has had on society, because it really is the biggest redistribution of wealth that I'm aware of in recent years. But it's a redistribution from the poor to the wealthy, and so I think you would probably appreciate some of the facts that I pulled out in that research, on the
Well, you're
bill.
saying you're saying that the qualified FELSA overtime isn't going to help people for 3 years.
Oh,
You're
I'm
saying
not
it's
saying
that
there were no positive impacts. I'm saying the overall net effect from a socioeconomic perspective is that the poorer you are, the more money you lose, and the wealthier you are, the more money you gain from the big ugly bill. Net
that's how
net.
the world works, unfortunately.
No,
It's
no,
sort
it
of like
actually was the opposite. It
it's
was
the
the
sprinkle
opposite under
on the
other
ice cream
administrations. So
sundae.
yeah.
It's like you help the wealthy people because you want them to, you have a lobby, you have a political, you need to grease the wheels to get this bill to pass. So it's like you have an ice cream sundae, and the ice cream is for the wealthy, and the chocolate flakes on top, whatever you call those little jimmies, whatever you call them, they're for the poor, right? You give the poorer people a nice little thing, the little chocolate stuff on top of the sundae. They get that small amount that's nice for them. They get the qualified overtime. They get a few nice things, right? But then the rest of that ice cream sundae is all for the wealthy. And this is how this is what they need to get this bill to pass, and it's just not fair. I wish it could be that the poor get more. But
Well,
it's like
they
a
can
corrupt world.
if we vote for the people who actually give the poor more. But if we vote for the people who give the poor less and take from the poor and give to the wealthy, those are the people that get into power. And that's who's in power right now, is the people who take from the poor and give to the wealthy. And that's what they've shown through that bill, is they had the biggest redistribution of wealth in modern history, to take from the poor and give to the wealthy, and put America in far more debt. And that debt goes on to every US citizen. and half of this country can't afford that debt.
Well, I'm sure they are putting people in debt because it's a temporary thing to give qualified OT or
No, that's not
qualified
that's
tips.
not that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the amount of spending that went into the military and other other areas that put America in more debt as a country. So we actually pay more in debt now than we do for the military, which is scary because we have the highest military spend by far, bigger than the next 10 countries combined. But anyway, it's 9:15. I gotta put my kids to bed. Jennifer, I think, has been quiet. So Jennifer, do you want to say something quick? It's good to see you, Jennifer. You're on mute. Maybe she stepped away. Um, so I do have to close out. But I really want to thank everybody for the diverse political perspectives, the diverse
Oh, I'm
philosophical
sorry.
perspectives. Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Jennifer.
I thought I was on unmute.
Okay,
That
go ahead.
I agree with you totally because we it's obvious that it's been a redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich. Um, and also, we really have to address the issue of crime by addressing um, addiction and mental illness, but nobody seems to do that. But one thing that I feel strongly about, and I've noticed for many, 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 many years, that the Republicans are always trying to manipulate the reporting of crime and the way they talk about crime to, I guess, get people to agree to give up some freedom. And I think we should be very, uh, you know, careful about that. And I
I'm trying
mean,
to. I'm
what?
going to look up a quote that reminds me of what you're talking about. It's a Ben Franklin quote. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. And I really
Right,
like that quote. I mean,
right,
we have to keep things like free and fair, and we have to, and that's the point I think that Carrie was saying about, the solution to a little bit of, unethical speech is more speech, to try to show that that's not the right kind of thing that we should be saying. Now, that's not speech that causes significant unnecessary harm. That's a different story and has always been illegal. So there are limits to free speech. But anyway,
and the other
um,
thing about
yeah,
the crime and corruption is that Trump has pardoned so many people who are guilty of so many crimes and so much corruption and
yeah.
so much drug peddling. I mean, it's just a joke. I mean, he's
Well,
like the king of corruption and
he actually has a program where he auctions off pardons for $1 to $3 million. So
yeah,
if you have $1 to $3 million
right,
and you commit the most heinous crime, you can get off
exactly,
by giving that money to Trump. And I
exactly.
think if we're talking about corruption, it's important to recognize that that is a real thing. It's been looked at. It's not something that anyone that I've seen actually disputed, because it's just, there's clear data that shows that that's being done.
Right.
And just lots and lots of examples, which is why I think he was able to accumulate so much wealth by being president. That's
Of
$1.4 billion
course.
is a lot of money.
Yes.
But you're
Fraud
getting
and
given gold
corruption.
bars for giving tariffs, and you're giving tariffs to everybody all the time, then you end up making a lot of money that way. So um,
Yeah. Thank you.
so he's a more better at making money as a politician than he was as a businessman. He was in the
Oh,
bottom
yeah,
5% of wealth earners as a businessman.
exactly.
If he had actually never invested in any company and he just put his money into an index fund, which is how I invest, he would be worth 10 times what he's worth now. But anyway, who's counting? Thank you all for the diverse political perspectives, for the diverse philosophical perspectives, and I hope to see you guys back next week. And we'll probably have a different topic, but we want these different perspectives because that's where we learn, from hearing why other people have different ideas than us and sharing opinions and research that we've done. And I hope that we've all learned something tonight, if nothing else, that someone has a different perspective than us and why they have it. And so thank you all for coming, and hope you all have a great night.